This is the BiggerPockets podcast, show 243.
You're listening to BiggerPockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
What's going on, everybody? This is Josh Dorkin, host of the BiggerPockets podcast, here with my co-host, Mr. Brandon Turner. What's going on, man?
You know, Josh, so I'm sitting here in Scott Trench's office right now with this giant American flag behind me. I'm feeling really patriotic because I'm actually here in Denver right now, which is unusual.
Yes.
I actually don't live in Denver, which people don't realize that sometimes. But no, I'm actually here in Denver, hanging out with you. You're like 40 feet away from me right now.
Yep.
And I'm about to come give you a big, I don't know, what's the word?
Smooch?
Nuggie? Where you grab somebody by the noogie, where you grab them by the arm and you like do their head, you know?
Yeah, I don't want a noogie. I don't want a hug. I don't want a smooch. Just,
It's not like a wedgie. That would be even better.
Just keep your distance. That's all.
I'll stay in this office. You stay in yours.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Anyway, so no,
it's good to see you, man. Yeah,
it is good to see you. Yeah,
I got to meet Rosie this morning, like for the first time.
Rosie Lou.
Wow.
It was too long. It took 15 months. She's 15 months old.
Yeah, that's absurd. That's absurd. She's cute, man. Very, very cute kid.
Thank you. She's pretty awesome. Her and Heather at the zoo right now, at the Denver Zoo.
With my wife, by the way.
No, she couldn't make it.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
well,
she had to, I don't know. You should probably find out. Hopefully.
I'm busy working, so you know.
Yeah, you're busy. She's got apparently had stuff going on more important than my wife. So.
Well, listen, I'm not even going to go there. I'll just stop. I'll just stop.
Out of this.
I'll just stop. You guys, this is show 243 of the BiggerPockets podcast. You can check out our show notes at BiggerPockets.com/show 243. We have a great show ahead for you. Before we get into that thing, I just don't want to really, talk to Brandon much more. So before we get into this thing, Brandon, why don't you share today's quick tip?
Today's quick tip is something you all know, but we're going to say it again anyway. Every single week, we've got live webinars. That means an online class that we're teaching. I host some of them. Matt Fairclough teaches some of them. Dave Meyer teaches some of them. And we just sit down and we explain like step-by-step how to do cool stuff in real estate. And they're completely free. You can show up live. They're usually on Wednesdays and then also sometimes Thursdays or Fridays. Anyway, come check out what the next webinar is. Go to BiggerPockets.com/webinar or webinars. I think plural now, but they both go there.
They both work.
And if you are a BiggerPockets Pro member, here's a little pro tip. You can actually watch them later. You don't have to watch them live. You can actually show up later as a pro member. So go to BiggerPockets.com/pro replay, and you can check out like over 50 hours of the past ones. And every week we upload the new one there when they record. Okay.
Awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Well, today's show is really cool. The reason, look, I mean, I know we say that over and over again. Here's why I like today's show as much as I do. Our guest is an average guy. He's an average Joe.
An average Joe.
That was good.
Because his name's Joe.
Yes.
No, Josh, let me explain. His name's actually Joe.
What?
No, let me explain.
What?
So his real name is Joe, and there's a phrase, average Joe.
Yes, I get it. All right.
Josh,
so
okay.
JD, otherwise known as Joe, is our guest. And anyway, so he never set out to get rich. He never set out to build some empire. He's a regular guy who's looking at his bank account saying, wow, I'm making no money on my money in the bank. The banks pay bupkis as far as interest is concerned. And by the way, bupkis, for those of you who don't know what it means, is nothing. And so what do I do? Like, I would like to make some money. And instead of going into the market, my presumption, because we didn't really dive into why real estate versus the stock market, but he decided to get involved in the market. And I think it's great. I think it's a great path. I think it makes a lot of sense. By the way, this guy has taken his knocks. I mean, his first real estate experience was losing over $100,000 in real estate. And then he got back and got back on board again. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to take away, and overall, admirable to kind of see how he's gone through his path. And anyway, lot to learn from Joe. So I'm pretty excited to have this one.
Me too. Should be a lot of fun. So With that, I don't know. Before I bring him in, maybe you're always saying this, but I'll say it this time because maybe it'll be more of an impact because I'm just so much more eloquent than you are. Eloquent.
Wow.
How do you say that?
Clearly, you're more eloquent than I am. What are you trying to do here? Are you trying to say, Joe? Welcome to the show.
No. I'm going to tell people.
Whoa.
You know what? We love ratings and reviews in iTunes. That's how iTunes chooses to show more people the show. So if you've not left this one yet, do so. And then hit us up on like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and be like, hey, I just left you a review. And we're going to give you a big, giant digital bear hug. You can hit Josh at JRDorkin on Twitter or on Instagram at JRDorkin.
Yep.
Or you can hit me at Brandon at BP on Twitter or at Beardy Brandon on Instagram.
Wow. That's awesome. Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you in advance. So let's get to the show. Joe, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you here.
Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. It's humbling to be asked.
Oh.
Yeah, this should be a lot of fun today. So
we didn't really ask you. I mean, it just kind of...
You showed up at the office. And
you're like, Josh, Brandon, I'm going to be on your show. And we're like, oh, okay. Well, if you put it that way, we have no choice but to have you. So
I'm sure we just said that.
I think I don't remember. I think I maybe had passed a message to many and said, hey, if you ever need a guest, those guys sound like they have a lot of fun on there.
We ran out of all qualified guests, which is why you're here. So
speaking of qualified,
you got to do what you got to do.
Before we get into like your real estate story, I've got a note from Mindy saying that you are in a professional rock band and you had a song played at the Super Bowl. Can you tell us real quick? I mean, nothing to do with real estate. I just want to know. I got to know.
That is true. A song that I wrote, which is called God, Guns, and NASCAR, was played at the Super Bowl with the 49ers and Ravens. And how that got in there was a place we had played. The sound man was picked. He worked sound for the Tennessee Titans football team. When they do the Super Bowls, they kind of put an amalgamation together of all the sound people. And so he got to go down there and everybody got to put together a little bit of their song list. And one of my songs was on his playlist. So
awesome.
I wasn't there, but 100,000 people got to hear my crazy hillbilly song.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Nice. That is.
No money, but what are you going to do?
Hey, fame and fortune. Well, fame without fortune.
Real estate.
Yeah.
There you go. So let's get into real estate. How did you get into real estate investing?
Okay, well, I mean, probably maybe typical like most people did. I'm married. Me and my wife had bought a couple houses that we just lived in, just primary residences. And then about 15 or 16 years ago, I guess it would be now, we decided we were going to do some new construction. And the original plan was we were going to build this house. It was going to be our house. And we were going to sell the house that we had. And then once we got into it a little bit, we were like, well, we think maybe we can make some money on this, and we'll sell the house that we're living in, and we'll stay in the house that we're living in, and we'll sell the new construction house. And it turned into a total disaster. We lost a boatload of money. I mean, we lost 6 figures worth of money on this project. And
what happened? I mean, how did you on a spec bill that you were going to live in? How did you lose that much money? What happened? Was that the market crashing?
Well, yeah, it was a combination of things all together. I mean, it was, self-inflicted Barney Fife gunshot wounds that, we did on ourselves. It was, the market had the way it was at that time. There was a lot of new construction was being built all at the same time that we were competing with. Mistakes that we made, cost overruns. We had a construction loan through the financing bank that we were using. That just dragged on nonstop, and we can pick out any one of these things and go into more detail. But the amalgamation of the group ended up that we sold at a huge discount, basically to keep from going bankrupt. To keep from being completely homeless.
Wow. Hey, so I actually want to dive in more because your misery makes us all feel better about ourselves. No, look, you learned something from it. You didn't shy away and bounce out of the industry. Obviously we're going to learn a little bit more about what happened, but since this is a show where, we talk to people with the hope to inspire and educate,
right.
Somebody who comes into real estate and says, I want to do a new construction build. I want to build a house from scratch, for investment or even primary residence, right? Mm-hmm. What do they need to do to not become the Joe 15 years later. Well, maybe they want to be you 15 years later, but like, to not have experienced what you experienced and lose six figures. What advice would you offer to them on some of these key mistakes that you made?
Well, I think, the primary thing was, I think that our biggest mistake, if I had to point to one, was I think we never really sat down and got the numbers correct. We never sat down, things that we thought, oh, we'd buy this piece of land, and you start, you build a foundation, and you build some framing, and you plop a house on top of it, and hey, you're finished. And we ended up with things like, for example, the property we bought. We had no idea this property had been used. It was a lot in a little subdivision. We had no idea that it was the filling ground for all of the stump and tree debris for the subdivision. So before we could even start building a foundation, we had about a month's worth of grading and clearing and pulling tree stumps out, and just huge cost overrun on this. Yeah, I mean, they were pulling out trees that were, the stumps were probably 150 years old, just enormous trees. So we, before we had started putting a piece of cement in the ground, we had probably $30,000 worth of cost overrun.
How does somebody avoid that? I mean, like, what would a novice investor need to do to know ahead of time that there's stumps in the ground or there's something else in the ground that they wouldn't expect?
I would say probably, as far as just on raw land, I mean, it would have helped if the land had been prepped before we actually looked at it. So, when we looked at land, it was overgrown. It had weeds and trees and things, brush and scrub and things that you couldn't see in there. So, from that aspect, I think that we looked at the property as, this is a great location here at the end of this dead end street. And we didn't look at it from an investment standpoint at the beginning. And that was where I think we made our biggest mistake, just pointing at the property, because we looked at it as, hey, this would be a great place to live. Maybe not such a great place to sell to make some money.
Gotcha. Any other, bits of advice on this deal that, you would share to help people avoid losing six figures?
Well, I'd say, I mean, we did a construction loan, for example, on this property, and the draws that we had to go through with the bank, I mean, there was so many loopholes that you had to jump before they would release funds. So what we started finding is, as we were building this house, we were really depleting our own funds, trying to keep subcontractors in business. We did the GC ourselves. And so, as for example, rough and framing was finished. The framers want to be paid. They don't want to hear about construction loans and we have to wait 3 weeks or 4 weeks for First Union to sign off on this or the inspector to show up. And they want their money. Yeah. And so what ended up happening when we got maybe halfway in or a little bit more was we had done a serious amount of depletion of our funds. As the bank came in and they did their inspections and they released funds, but sometimes they would say, well, this is only 50% done, or we're only going to release X amount of dollars for this project, even though the cost estimates on the front end, when we had gone and gotten a construction loan, said that, framing was going to cost this and we'll release this. They might come out and say, well, we're only going to release 75% of that because we think that's what it works out to. So by the time we were halfway in, I mean, we had probably depleted, I don't know how much, we had depleted quite a bit of our own funds just trying to stay ahead of contractors in order to keep people working. But once we had really depleted our own funds, and then we were really at the mercy of the bank. In order to get projects done, we had to wait on draws and we had to wait on inspections, and so the process just started grinding to a halt. And the total new build took about 14 months.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just a crazy amount of time, and
you lost six figures on it.
Yeah, when it was all said and done, when we got close to the end, when we got real close to the end, we were doing a lot of work ourselves. Wow. We weren't subbing out so much stuff anymore because we were so far into it. It was going to be a brutal beating, and so we were doing a lot of work ourselves.
Would you recommend that at that point? Should new investors avoid new construction for their first few deals until they get more experienced, or do you think that was just a lot of freak accidents at one time for you?
No, I a lot of our errors were self-inflicted. There was other things that went against us. There was right when we got about 65% into this house on the other side of the road, a developer bought like 200 acres and started dropping houses like pieces of popcorn. and they were dropping houses. The build quality on them was really poor, and things that we had done to make our house better build quality, let's say, they weren't doing at all, but nobody can see inside walls. People can't see 2x6 walls, and they can't see, special tongue and groove subfloor plywood and things like that. People can't see that. They can see square footage, they can see kitchens, bathrooms. And so these guys were dropping these houses down, and we were trying to compete with them. So some of it was just some of that timing issue. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just inexperience. We thought from, we've fixed up houses and we've done work on our own houses, and, we've remodeled this and that, we can take off from this. No problem. We'll sell our house. No problem. Then when we had a problem with that, we said, we'll make a, pretty good bundle of money on this. And we just did not have the experience to do this at all.
Yeah. So what happened next? I mean, how did you move on? How did you decide to actually get more heavily into real estate after such a horrible thing? And then what was that next thing?
Well, the first thing that happened next was we said, never again. We're never going to look at any houses. That's the end of real estate for us. And so we concentrated on, rebuilding our net worth, which was depleted down to negative worth. After we spent about, let's say, 10 years rebuilding our balance sheet, because we're just normal, regular blue collar people, more or less. I kind of have a white collar now, but. But be that as it may, after we spent about the next 10 or 11 years rebuilding our balance sheet and getting our finances in order, we started thinking about it, because I remember I'd opened a bank statement one day, and we had, we've got pension and IRAs and some other stuff, but I'd opened this bank statement, and for close to six figures in there, I think there was like $1.50 in interest in this bank statement. When I opened it up, I was like, all right, we're gonna have to do something here. We cannot leave this money sitting here. This is not going to work out. And right about the same time, I had started looking at my pension and thinking, I'm getting close to 50, and started thinking about, okay, what comes next? So thinking about when I retire, what's our money situation going to look like? And I had run my pension numbers, and I was like, originally at that time we thought, pay off whatever remaining mortgage we might have on the house, and, stockpile our funds, and then take the pension, and that'll be it. And I ran the numbers, and I was like, oh, wait a second, I'm going to have a second job. This ain't going to pan out. So that was when we really started looking at real estate more seriously, I think, because, it was something we said, hey, maybe we should give this thing a second try. We went to this $100,000 school of hard knocks. Maybe we should try to put some of this knowledge into practice. Yeah. And so that was really when we started looking at things again.
All right. So what'd you do? Sorry, Josh. Well, cutting you off.
We decided really that we kind of looked at, we thought maybe we might do a fix and flip or something like that. But and then we said, well, maybe we'll look at some multifamily. We got an agent, we started looking at things, and ultimately we just kind of fell into single family rentals. I mean, we looked at some multifamily, and there, in the area that I'm in, I'm not in a very big metropolitan area. So,
where are you?
I'm halfway between Asheville and Johnson City, Tennessee. So Asheville, North Carolina, most people know where that is. Yep. That's where I work in Nashville. And then I live in Tennessee, but I live a little closer to Johnson City, but roughly about halfway between the two. So we invest in Johnson City up in North Tennessee.
And you said you fell into single families. Why single families? If you were looking at flipping, you were looking at multi, why did you ultimately choose to go with single?
Well, when the multifamily that we looked at was pretty daunting. I mean, it was the stuff that we looked at that we thought, because we went into it, this was not really having a lot of knowledge about the BRRRR method and leveraging and all those kind of things that, maybe come later. This was really just, me and my wife, a couple of people thinking, hey, we've got this bundle of cash, and, maybe we should do something with this. So when we looked at what kind of fit into that category, we were like, wow, these things are going to need some really major work. There's going to be some big projects. So we kind of expanded our viewpoint to say, well, let's look at some houses and see how those work out. And eventually we found a house. It was a Tired Landlord. It was somebody who had a property that was a rental. They had rented out and had real poor quality renters and a pretty poor quality house. But when you went inside and you looked at it, you kind of see, from our experience with building the new construction and just our general real estate experience in our own life, I mean, we knew about electrical and plumbing and drywall and floors and all those kind of things. And you can kind of go into this place and see, hey, this place really isn't that bad. And so, we threw out an offer, which was, I thought kind of a low ball, crazy offer, and they took it. They said, hey, we're ready to be out of this game. And they took it. They said, well, we're not going to fix anything for that price. And we said, well, that's okay. We'll take care of it from here.
What was it on the market for, and what did you offer?
So I think we ultimately settled at 37, and I think it was maybe 60 or something like that, somewhere in that neighborhood. So yeah, it was a pretty good spread. And then we ended up when we ended up rehabbing the house, I think we ended up with around $11,000 or so in the rehab, all in all. And then later on, most everything we have is owned free and clear. We don't have much in the way of leverage. We have a couple houses that we've actually done the BRRRR method, so to speak, on when we needed to free up some cash to do some other deals. But pretty much everything we own outright.
So 11K really quick on that 37 is at 48. What's that house worth, or what was it worth after you fixed it?
It's worth almost 100 now.
Got it.
So yeah.
And what did it rent for?
The house rents right now for almost $1,000.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into a couple of things here, if I could. First of all, I like that you mentioned the Tired Landlord.
Yeah.
Like a
Sure.
failed, tired. Like there are, tell people that a lot, that there's a lot of landlords who just hate being a landlord. Like a lot of them out there. In fact, I don't know the percentage, but it's probably like 80% of landlords just hate being landlords. Like they get into it for whatever reason. They inherit a house, or maybe they read a book or whatever, but they're not good at it. They don't like it. They lose money in it. And so one of those things is like, if you're out there, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I can't find any deals, like your strategy could be as simple as find landlords and ask them if you can buy their property. Because there's a very good chance that they hate being a landlord and would sell if the price was right. Or maybe if they just sell for any reason, just they want to get out. I never underestimate the hatred people have for tenants,
Yeah, I would agree with that. These people that we actually bought this house from, I mean, I remember we were sitting there at the closing and we, like I said, we really didn't have any idea. Before we bought this house, we kind of sat down and did worst case scenario. Like we took such a beating on that new construction that we sat down and we ran numbers, ad infinitum. This was actually before I even knew about the BP calculators and things like that. But we ran similar numbers of that and said, okay, what's our worst case scenario if we buy this house and we can't rent it and we have to sell it, we fix it up, and how much money would we stand to lose and all that kind of stuff. And we found the worst case scenario really wasn't bad at all in the case of what we were doing in terms of what we were buying it for. But I remember we were sitting at the closing, and so I had no real idea how much things rented for. I mean, I had kind of a vague idea, but nothing for sure. We hadn't tried to rent any houses out.
Yeah.
And I asked the guy, and I said, what do you usually get for rent in here? He said, I usually don't have too much trouble getting maybe $400 or so. And I was like, wow, I almost fell out of my seat. I was thinking, oh gosh, if I have to rent this $400, I'm going to lose a lot of money.
Yep.
So hopefully I can do better than that. And of course, thankfully, what we found was that he was just attracting a poor quality tenants. He had a house where he had one room that was, one wall was paneling and one wall was pink and one wall was a different color, and the ceiling had been painted in 20 years, and just those kind of things where they just had given up. Essentially, they just said, we're not going to fix anything, we're not going to paint anything, we're not going to clean a window, we're not going to do anything. And so we put a little bit of effort into it and really made it work pretty well.
So
cool.
Really quick, a couple things to share for those people listening. One is know your numbers. So before you buy the house, you got to know what this thing's going to rent out for, right? Obviously, we know that now, but it's not that obvious. It's not that obvious to everybody. So make sure you know what the numbers are, what kind of rents it can fetch, a property can fetch if you're going to be becoming a landlord, and those opportunities, like a house in that condition, is a great opportunity to come in, tweak it, fix it, and raise the rents dramatically. So, investors get really excited when they see those kinds of things. And oftentimes the folks who are selling don't really know the value of the property anyway. They They have no way to determine it. So anyway, that said, also you had mentioned the BiggerPockets calculators. Folks can get to the calculators on BiggerPockets by going to biggerpockets.com/analysis. That's biggerpockets.com/analysis. And we've got calculators to help you analyze flips or buy and holds or BRRRR, all sorts of cool stuff. So check that out.
My wife often says that she thinks that the people who own that house probably, when it comes up, every once in a while it'll come open. It stays rented. It's never had more than a couple of days vacancy. But she says when the people who own that house, when they see it up for rent, they probably just fall over dead when they see the rents that we get from this house.
Well, I found the same thing is true, in this might not be true, where Josh is at, or, like Denver or like really expensive markets, but in a more rural market, like where I live and maybe where you're investing, there are so many bad houses and people they're pink walls and carpet that's 30 years old, and people are renting them. And so what I found is the same thing that you did is they might be getting 400 and I can get 800 or more just by having it look halfway decent, by having new carpet and having nice walls, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of good tenants in bad areas or small areas, and that they just have nowhere to rent. They're just like, well, I don't want to rent the crappy place for $400. I would gladly pay $8,000-$9,000. There's just nothing available. So when you can be that, and you can be that niche in a market like that, it's a really good niche to have.
Yeah, one thing we found was that we, in our area, there's such a lack of professionalism that you're only competing against yourself. There's really no competition against the other landlords. As a matter of fact, we had a house up for rent once, and a college student ended up renting it, and he came to look at it with his mother, and he looked at the house, and they looked at the house, and when they were done, he said, this place only costs that much. It should cost a lot more. His mother wanted to slap him across the face.
Nice.
Say, shut up! I'm paying for this.
Yep. So I would go back to one more thing, because I get this question all the time. I do these live webinars, BiggerPockets webinars every week.
Sure.
And we always analyze deals on them. And in the process of analyzing the deal, obviously the question comes up, how much will it rent for? And where you said earlier, you didn't know, the guy said 400, you were hoping you'd do more. Now that you're an experienced investor today, can you talk to the people listening to this right now? How do they know, if they're looking at a property, how do they even know what it's going to rent for?
Well, one thing we do now as we pick up new houses, of course, we know our market pretty good. So we have, enough houses in our market and have enough track record that we have a pretty good understanding what things will rent for. And so nothing stays on the market very long. But, you can certainly do comparisons with, Zillow and Realtor.com and Trulia and other places like that. You can go to open houses and see the houses yourself and kind of compare. What's the neighborhood look like? What does this house compare to what I have or what I'm thinking about doing in the house that I've got? It's really just kind of doing your research, putting yourself out there, driving around, looking at the neighborhoods. When we buy houses, we buy specific neighborhoods. There's even in the rural area somewhat that we're in. There's places that I know we're not going to buy a house in that neighborhood. It's not going to be easy to rent. A single woman is not going to rent in that neighborhood, so we're not going to touch that place. So just knowing your neighborhoods, and that's one of the things about maybe investing out of town. Sometimes I think it can be real troublesome for people that, real estate is local for sure.
Yeah.
When the crash happened in 2007, 2008, I work in the utility industry, and it really affected the city that I work in terribly. The housing developments around here, a number of them went bust. But where I live and where I invest, those people there barely even knew it happened.
Yeah.
The growth has been kind of slower and steady, so you didn't have this kind of explosiveness like we had here in Asheville where I work. But on the flip side of things, the market was a lot more stable. Yeah. So, I think knowing your markets is key for sure.
Hey, Joe, how does somebody do that? I'm a nobby. I'm a novice. A hobbyist, knobby, I don't know. New hobby.
Newbie, novice,
I don't know. Put it together, knobby.
That could be our BiggerPockets t-shirt, Josh.
I'm a knobby.
Big pocket terms.
Yeah. How does somebody know whether or not a neighborhood's going to be one that will work for them? Obviously, what works for you is going to be different than what works for Brandon, is going to be different than what works for, any of a number of the listeners. So, but for them, how would somebody really determine what's an okay neighborhood for them to be thinking about?
I think, you have to, if you know what your strategy is, like, let's say we're talking about buy and hold and you're going to be renting out houses. I think the next thing is you have to really know, who do you want to rent to? There was a discussion in the forums a couple weeks ago where somebody had posted up about, oh, somebody has terrible housing and how can they, provide such terrible housing? And it was a pretty long thread. And, the upshot of it was, hey, even people that really can't afford much or are addicted to drugs or on the verge of homeless, they have to have some place to live too. And these particular landlords, that's their market. Those are the tenants they cater to. They understand that they're going to be evicting people every 4 months or struggling for the rent, but that's what they're aiming for. So, if you know what your tenant class is, we knew from the beginning that we didn't want to deal with things like Section 8. We didn't want to deal with having to have a lot of evictions and things like that. So we wanted to attract a higher class tenant. And so then we had to think, okay, well, what are those tenants going to want? What are the amenities that are going to be important? What are the neighborhoods that are going to feel safe living in, or close to shopping, or close to school, or close to the university? We're a university town, so, close to the college. So, we knew the kind of people that we wanted to attract on the front end. And then we geared what we did to that strategy. So
there you go.
I like that. I like that a lot.
If you knew you were just going to provide, say, lower class, I was listening to some of your earlier podcasts about the trailer parks, and I can't remember the guest's name, but talking, saying, hey, we bought a trailer park and their clientele was this, people that would just in and out. They didn't have documentation, they didn't have a job, things like that. We didn't, the only check we did was, do they have $600 in their hand, things like that. And then he said, we wanted to turn that trailer park around and attract a different class of people. So they did. Right. They aimed for a different core tenants.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important. One of the things that we talk about at BiggerPockets all the time is, how do we help people who've never done a deal to get to that first deal? How do we help the people who, may have started but are struggling and can't figure out, what direction to take, how to do that? And so one of those key decisions is absolutely, like, what's your tolerance of risk? What are you willing to put up with? Do you want to deal with evicting, addicts in the middle of the night? Now that could happen in any neighborhood, but likelihood is higher in tougher neighborhoods, right? To deal with more of the problems. So you're never clear from that. Even the uber rich are drug addicts. They're in that class, right? So, so for folks to really think about the class of tenant, allows you to now create this image in your head. Hey, these are the people that I want to work with. This is the kind of neighborhood, the kind of area. I don't want to invest in an area where there's bars on the windows, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to invest in an area where, the crime reports say that there's break-ins in the cars every single week. You got to look at that. You got to look at all these things. This is not just like hey, I want houses that are cheap. Well, that doesn't mean anything. That's not going to tell you what kind of success you're going to have or what kind of headaches you're going to be dealing with.
Sure. One of the things I do, I know most of our neighborhoods now pretty well, but one of the things I do that I did at the beginning was I would drive around a neighborhood at, say 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Yep. And you may say stereotyping or whatever, but if I saw a lot of able-bodied young men hanging around a neighborhood at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, I would have to think about that neighborhood. Those people probably should be working somewhere. Maybe they all have night jobs, but the likelihood is that you're looking at an area where there's a lot of people that just kind of maybe are down on their luck or don't have employment opportunities and things like that. And that's going to attract a different class of people than what we wanted to rent to.
Yeah.
Yep. And to go to what you said earlier, sometimes in a market, I know my market. Like, I know that there are certain streets that the price is the exact same as this little sub neighborhood, or this street is the same price as this street, but I would never buy in this street and I would buy in this one. And that's where out of town investors run into problems. Like, all they see is the numbers. Like, this would rent, this is, and even like the rent might be the same, purchase price same. I would never buy here because I just know, right? So if you're going to a market you don't understand, let's say you live in an expensive market, you want to buy, in another market, turnkey, whatever. Like, you've got to connect with local people who have lived there for years. Like, maybe fly out there, drive out there,
Sure.
you know, make some friends on BiggerPockets who invest in that market. Because if somebody comes to me, I'm going to tell them, don't buy on that street. Or at least I would tell them I would never buy there, but I would buy here. I'm happy to tell people that because I know my market. I know what's one street to another. So yeah, if you're looking at a market and you don't know that to that degree, then find somebody who does and ask for help.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, some of the last year or two, some of the deals that we were beat out on, you know, they would have been deals at the right price, and some of these houses, what the price they ended up selling for us, like, wow, you know, these people are crazy. You know, there's no way they're going to make any money on this house. You know, and then, you know, talking through my agent, who, you know, it's not a very big area, so everybody knows everybody else. You know, and then you find out, you know, a month later, oh, it's, you know, somebody from, you know, Charlotte or somebody from Atlanta that bought that house. You know, it's going to be a big investment for them. Well, probably not at the price they paid. You know, maybe one day. You know, I mean, I'm not omnipotent. If I was, I would have never lost so much money on construction. But nevertheless.
Yeah. All right. So,
well, cool. So,
what have you done since then? Right. I mean, it sounds like you've been buying single families. Is that it? I mean, walk us big picture. The last, if my math is right, the last 15 years since you kind of got started and bought that first, not the new construction, but the first house. What have you done since then?
Well, you know, this whole thing, we never really, I don't know that we actually set out to be real estate investors. You know, we're just working class people that had a chunk of money to do something with that we had saved up. I mean, kind of a nest egg, if you will. I mean, we had this money and we said, you know, and maybe that's a little more dangerous than somebody who uses leverage, because then the bank has to say, hey, is that a good deal or not? Whereas, you know, it's just us with our pot of money and say, hey, you want to take some of this so we can have that house and work ourselves to death? You know, so maybe that's a little dangerous, but, you know, we never really set out to do that. I mean, we just said, hey, you know, let's try to put this money in something that will make a little bit more than $1.50 every month, you know, and, you know, as it turned out, as we bought, you know, the properties to accumulate about a dozen properties, you know, we've created an income stream that essentially it replaces my salary for sure. I mean, if I love my job and I love what I do, but if for some reason my elected board decided, hey, we don't want you anymore, I guess I would just be retired a little earlier than I thought, because you know, we created an income stream out of this thing, and the fixed asset wealth. That's just the cash flow. If we were to harvest off the equity in all the houses we have, and we've created about 7 figures of wealth, and you know. Wow. I don't know that we set out to do that. It just kind of, you know, one turned into another. And as we did it and we got some experience and we knew, okay, you know, renters will pay for square footage and they'll pay for a dishwasher and central heat and air, but they're not going to pay for a granite countertop. Renters aren't going to pay for stainless steel appliances. You know, they don't want those things. Renters want location. They want a safe neighborhood. They want the most square footage, some storage, and some basic amenities, you know. And so as we got experience doing that, and understanding the market better, you know, it really just snowballed to where, you know, I mean, we bought one house where we bought it for $50,000. I think we had $3,000 or $4,000 in rehab costs, and the house is worth $130,000. You know, it's, I mean, as we got some experience doing this, and we haven't done a million deals like some of the guests, but you know, it's kind of been a slow and steady, you know. My thing is, you know, hey, you can be just a regular old Joe and do this kind of thing. You don't have to.
I agree.
You don't have to be the guy out there swinging 50 apartments and, you know, and leveraging at 80 or 85%. I mean, you can, you know, I mean, we average out 3 or 4 a year, and you know, and that's our gig, and you know, but it's built a pretty good chunk of wealth.
So you're at a dozen now. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
And are you aiming to increase that, or are you pretty happy with where you're at?
No, I think, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, right now the market has gotten hotter. So like everybody says, you know, pretty much every market saying, oh, there's no deals to be had. And it's, you know, even where I'm at, it's gotten tougher, you know, where I look at things and, you know, some of it's just my perception. Oh, I was buying this house for 30 and now I have to pay 60, you know, so some of it's just unrealistic expectations on my own part, you know, but the market has gotten hotter and based on what you can charge for rent and what you can collect. So, you know, some of that maybe has slowed down, but, you know, we've seen some other opportunities. What we found is that there's no good professional management where we are. I mean, the the management opportunities that are here are really limited and poorly done. So that's probably an area that we're going to branch into. We've had people ask us, hey, would you manage our properties? Would you be interested in doing something like that? So maybe kind of branching into that, picking up some deals. We've talked about maybe going to some smaller multifamilies, but I don't know. We've never really said for sure. I can't say, we have this strategy and, that's where I want to be in 10 years. I mean, if it's a good deal and it's making money, hey, let's talk about it.
What I really like about your story is that, you didn't come at this like I'm going to be the next Grant Cardone. I'm not going to go out and buy millions and millions of dollars of properties overnight. And I'm like, you're working a day job. You're working a job. You like your job. You want to get a better retirement. You want to build wealth, but you're not out there hustling 50 hours a week to try to build your portfolio. You bought a dozen houses, and then you said earlier you don't have really mortgages on most of them, right?
That's right.
So like they just produce good cash flow. It's a secure investment. If the market tanks, you have no mortgage. I mean, it's such a conservative, easy. I don't know, easy. That's not the right word. Simple, like strategy that
you calling him
work
simple?
For most people in a good way, in a really good way. Yeah, this is like I don't know. I think this is something like most of our listeners probably are in your shoes 10 years ago, or maybe they're on the same journey as you are. They're saying, I don't need $1 billion. I just want enough that if I lost my job or if I wanted to quit my job at some point, I could. And, you don't have to have 50 units. You got a dozen properties and they pay all your bills. And I think that's financial freedom in my mind. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, it wasn't necessarily a strategy that we started out with as much as it just became the strategy. When we sat down and looked at it, after we said we would do the first one, and we actually had, when we started up, we had figured we had enough money, cash, our own cash, to do about 2 houses. So we said, well, we'll do the first one and see what happens. And it turned out so well. We said, well, let's do another one.
Right.
So we did another one.
So for 50 grand per house, you took your 100 grand that you had saved up, and you were getting way the hell more than the 0.1% that you were getting in the bank.
Right.
And it's a good means to an end. And all of a sudden, the next one and the next one. So how'd you get to the third and the fourth and the fifth house? How did you finance those?
Well, because I have a pretty good paying day job, I make a reasonable standard of living. I didn't have to do this. We saved up the money from someplace. Yeah. So what we did was we just turned all those profits back into the business, and so we grouped everything under a business name with the, later on with the thoughts that we might want to do some property management or something like that. So we kind of early on created a little business name and just grouped all the rentals underneath the business name. And every dollar essentially that we got from that, we didn't take it and go out, buy a Tesla or, quit our jobs and stay home watching Dancing with the Stars.
You guys always make fun of that show.
Somebody's been to my webinars.
Yeah. I've listened to a lot of podcasts. So we didn't take that money and do that. We took all those funds and just rolled it back into business. And pretty soon, the houses are paying for themselves. They're buying the next house. Yeah. There isn't any money coming out of our pockets. Yeah. We're just taking that money and just letting it buy the next house. And so the tenants are buying the houses.
It's a concept I call that cash flow recycling, because I like putting names to things, right? Like when you take the cash flow and you don't spend it, you recycle it into a new property, then that now is producing cash flow. You recycle that into the next one and then the next one. And it's such a powerful way to grow wealth because you're basically using exponential growth to build a portfolio. And so you might start small, but pretty soon you're getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And
it's called playing with the casino's money, Brandon.
There you go. I like.
Yeah, it really
that's
is
what
amazing.
it is. Yeah.
It's an amazing snowball effect. Yep. When I see a lot of people, I spend a lot of time on the forums, and I love the BiggerPockets forums. Big shout out to those things. They are great. But I spend a lot of time on the forums, and not every question, but there's a lot of questions. Hey, I don't have any money, and I want to start real estate investing, and I want to quit my job, in a month. What should I do? You're probably going to have to work for a while.
Yeah, but that might have been asked by like somebody who is like between 18 and 29, who I just offended like 80% of our listeners. No, look,
well, and it can be done, right? We've had examples of people who do it, but they're not doing it off of buying a rental property. They make a business like flipping houses or wholesaling.
Right. It's an active.
Sure, you want an active business. You want to quit your job, fine. There's ways to do it, but for most people like have a decent job, make a decent salary, like their job. They just don't want to stay there forever.
Yeah.
And your strategy, I think, is perfect for that. I mean, I think it's
one of the things about this, I don't want to pretend that this is all passive, because I mean, we spend a lot of sweat equity on houses and things like this. So I don't want to pretend like, we just bought this and everybody sat around and made money, because that's not the case at all. Sure. But I can honestly say, once the house is rehabbed, because the one strategy that we decided to do early on was we were going to full rehab the house from the very beginning when there was no people in it. If it needed a roof, it's getting a roof. If it needed a heating system, it's getting a heating system. So that when we put somebody in there, that was pretty much the end of it. We weren't going to deal with the house anymore, other than collecting the rent, dealing with an odd call here and there. And that has pretty much been the case. I mean, I would estimate, most houses we spend, if a house doesn't turn over a tenant, I would estimate that we spend 5 or 6 hours a year on the house. I'm not kidding. I mean, once a house is in, most of our tenants want to be left alone. They don't want the landlord coming in, knocking on, hey, how you doing? And can I come bother you and all that? So, you spend, it's almost as passive as you can get. And I wanted this to be with the least amount of aggravation as you could possibly get, because I have enough going on in my own life right now that, I don't need a job that has a hassle. And that's where we come with some of our strategies. Like, we don't take Section 8. I mean, I don't have anything against Section 8. It's one more thing. I have to have an inspection. I have to interface the pay where the government pays, and the tenant pays part of it. And, it's just not something we want to get into. I just want somebody who wants a nice, clean place that's just going to pay their money and be done with it.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. So where do you go from here? I mean, it sounds like, if something comes up, you may pick it up if it makes sense. If not, there's no aspiration here to kind of do anymore. You're a regular old Joe trying to just, make a dollar and live a solid life, and kind of using real estate as a means to help you get towards that retirement that you're hoping to have, in a way where, it's not just your pension and Social Security kind of giving you enough to barely survive on. It's, hey, I can actually plan ahead and build this lifestyle. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I mean, I've got a few more years before I could take early retirement here at my job, and I haven't made that decision yet. I don't know. We'll see when I get to that spot. But what it's done by creating this extra income stream, it's opened up possibilities. I teach for 2 different universities, and I enjoy doing that. I love the teaching. I teach public administration and economics and budgeting and things like that. And I love doing that, and that may be something, that I might want to keep doing on a regular part-time basis. And this just opens that avenue up for that. It creates, I can't remember the term, but one of the other BiggerPockets members had a term for this. I don't remember what the term was, but having all these income streams, where you've got this money coming in that, if you don't want to work, fine, you just stay at the house. But, if you want to work, you're not really dependent on it. You do what you want to do because, it's not really so much the money. Your needs are covered.
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, listen, thank you so much. This is great. I love what you've done. Congrats on what you've built for yourself and your family. And, obviously lots of luck going forward. I think it's time though, Brandon.
It is time for the fire round.
It's time for the fire round.
All right, let's get to these fire round questions. These questions come direct out of the BiggerPockets forums, which I know, JD, you are very active in, and we appreciate that. And I know a lot of other people have gotten a lot of good advice from you. So let's see what you got to say on these questions. Number 1, can I get started with real estate with 20 grand? And if so, how?
Sure. I mean, you can, if you're in the right market, that could be a pretty good chunk of a house in the right market. I know some places you obviously don't want to be buying houses in war zones and places that are, not going to have any return. But, that's a pretty good chunk of money. And if you're in a different kind of market, that's a 20% down payment on a $100,000 house. So I think, if you use that money to leverage, and I'm a big fan of leveraging, even though we don't do much of it ourselves, I know that if you want to really exponentially grow, that is a good way to do it, because I can just see from the few that we did, even though most of our cash is locked up in the houses and we haven't harvested that equity, I can see from the few that we did how we really grew that. And if you take that 20 grand and, take another 80 grand in leverage, you've got a $100,000 house right there. There's your start.
Yeah. Love it. Awesome. All right. So next question. I just had a question and Brandon, trolling me, decided to delete it. So I'm going to go to the next question here.
You kind of answered. That's why I went.
Yeah. All right. Next question. I went over to one of my tenants' units at a fourplex I own in Kern County, California yesterday. When I knocked on the door, the tenant tried not to let one of her dogs out. It squeezed between her and the dog and immediately bit me, landlord, on the lower leg, drawing blood and a puncture wound. Besides the medical end of the situation, which I took care of immediately with antibiotics, have any of you experienced this situation? What should I do? Get rid of the dog? ? So what do you do? Your tenant has a dog that bites you. How do you deal with it? It kind of sounds like they may not have even included anything on the lease for a dog, and maybe they didn't include something about a vicious dog. But what's your take on this?
Well, we actually rent to a lot of people. I'm amazed. Some of the people in the forums will say, well, we don't allow any pets, but I would estimate easily 75 to 80% of our applicants have pets for sure. So we rent to a lot of people that have dogs, and we have requirements on the dog has to be fixed. It has to have all of its current shots. Occasionally we meet the dog. We make that a requirement. So, if the logistics makes sense, sometimes it's not possible, but I mean, in a case like that, I don't know, that would probably be something where we'd be looking to say, you're probably going to need to make some alternate arrangements to move on here because, in a case like that where a dog has really come out and bit somebody else, I mean, that's an insurance liability. So, it probably wouldn't bother me personally, but I don't want the plumber getting bit.
Yeah,
so.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. All right, next question. Electric versus natural gas range ovens for tenants. Like if you could have a choice and let's say there's natural gas at the house or you're going to put in an electric one, what would you do?
Well, I know a lot of people like cooking with gas, and we like cooking with gas, but I just think electric is much less trouble. It's much easier to swap out. Something goes wrong, you go in, you pull the range out, and you pop a new one in, and boom, you're done. So just from ease of turning over, a lot of tenants may not understand how to use the gas properly if you can have a gas leak. So that's not something that I would, if I had a choice, I would go with electric. Now, on the heating side of things, if we were talking about heat, I like having gas heat because it kind of saves some of the wear and tear on your condenser. So if you on your compressor unit that's outside, if you have gas heat and AC, central heat and air, and you have gas heat, then it makes your unit outside run half as much. So, but from a stove, yeah, electric for sure.
Brandon, what do you do? Gas or electric?
Same thing. Electric stoves all the way. I'll put those in all day. Just for the same reason. I mean, if it was a really high-end house, I might leave natural gas. Like if it was a really good tenant, right? Yeah.
Right.
But
if you had somebody, if you had a house that you knew was going to have, somebody in it that really wanted to cook. But I can say some of our houses we've gone in after a tenant's been there for a year and the stove hasn't been used. So,
oh wow.
Nice.
The microwave was used, but not the stove.
Yep. All right. Last question. What is your best advice for tenant screening?
Oh boy. Well, I think that's where, we've had, knock on wood, we've had nothing but great tenants. And I think that it comes down to our screening. And, my wife plays a huge part in this because she is a really good judge of character, present company accepted.
Pretty much.
So, she's pretty good at talking to a tenant and saying, hey, this person's probably going to be trouble, just getting a feel for them, and then we combine that. So she kind of takes the people end of that equation. And then I'll take the more technical end of things where I do the background screening online and go through their written application. And, we have requirements on first and last and deposit and, maybe a little more stringent than other people. But, what I've found is that people, if you screen a tenant and you look at their credit report, I don't mean just getting a credit score, but you look at their credit report, you look at their background and eviction check, and you look at their application, and you see somebody that has stable work, no felonies, no evictions, no real anything on their credit scores. I mean, most people don't just turn into psychos from out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Most people, there's going to be some warning flags. And, and I think the people that run into trouble ignore the warning flags. They see something on there, but they're so desperate to get somebody in the place. They just say, well, I'm going to, kind of overlook that and talk myself out of it. And we haven't done that. Knock on wood,
good for you.
We haven't done that. We've, never really been afraid of vacancies. We own the house, so it's not like, oh, you have to run out and pay the mortgage bill. So that helps.
That's another reason why having, no mortgage. And again, there's that debate all day long. People talk about leverage versus not, but that is a huge benefit of not having a mortgage. Is it?
That's right.
You can wait a month, 2 months, 3 months. That was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from anybody. When I first got into real estate, got my first rental, somebody said, like if it means sitting empty for a month, 2 months, doesn't matter. The kind of tenant you get will determine your success more than anything else in the world. So like get the right tenant. And every time I've had an eviction with somebody, I've had a red flag. Like that I avoided. I mentally I was like, I ignored. I'm like, it's okay. They've changed.
I did that with my co-host. I mean, I had the pick of the litter, and
there were so many to choose from.
Look at what I ended up with.
Look what you ended up. This handsome devil. I mean, come on.
We've had such good tenants that we've placed people just on referrals. A place hasn't even come vacant. We haven't advertised it. I mean, I have signs. We never even put them in the yards anymore because we do half of our placement just out of referrals. Somebody that we've had a successful tenancy with, and tenants move for whatever reason. They go to school someplace else, or they take a job out of town, or they want to buy a house. There's no rhyme or reason to why they move, and they'll say, hey, I know somebody that's going to be looking for a place, and most people kind of tend to stick together. So people that are good people have good friends.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Cool. I think we got 4 questions that we want to.
We do at a time.
This man.
4.
Famous 4.
All right, these are the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week, and I know you've heard them, but I'll ask you anyway. Number 1, what is your favorite real estate related book?
My favorite real estate related book is kind of older, but it is Real Estate Investing for Dummies by Eric Tyson. And, it's kind of the first book I started off with, but, it really, it explains things that you might feel dumb asking somebody else.
Nice. Yeah. Which is also the reason BiggerPockets exists. Seriously, like that's why the forums are there. That's why our community exists. Is there aren't dumb questions. There just aren't. If you've never done this before, you don't know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to ask. And, I felt like people needed a place where they can just go and feel free to ask any question, no matter how quote unquote stupid it was. And, the truth of the matter is we all appreciate it because, even today, like Brandon, how many years later, you're reading stuff on the site and learning. Yeah. I'm listening to guests and reading stuff and learning.
I just posted something last night in the forums because I was like, I had a question about something and I was like, hey, let's find out what people got to say. Because I didn't know.
Exactly. So awesome. All right. Cool. Next question. What is your favorite business book?
Oh boy, that one's tough because I listen to a lot of business books. I do a lot of audio. I listen to a lot of audio books, and I do a lot of business books. So I don't know if I could pick one, but I could pick a couple. I love Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin. I think a few people mentioned that before, but it really kind of speaks to me along the Mr. Money Mustache type mentality. I think sometimes you want to build your real estate and you're investing in your income, but you kind of need to know, what's your enough number, you could do this until you're dead. You could do it nonstop and kill yourself doing it. So, what is the number that, what are you aiming for in life? So I really enjoy that book. $100 Startup by Chris Gilbo is a great book. I like inspirational books and I like inspirational people. Millionaire Next Door is one of my favorites. Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Work Week, some of them are just, they make you think outside the box. They make you think, hey, what are the possibilities? Not just focusing on what's right in front of your face, but what's possibilities, 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I love it.
There you go. Love it.
Awesome. All right, hobbies. What do you do for fun outside of all this real estate stuff?
Well, I play music in a rock band. I have a band called the Rhythm Brewers, rhythmbrewers.com. Shameless plug.
There you go. Wait, say that again. It's the what? What's the band name?
RhythmBrewers.com.
Rhythm
Brewers, like brewing beer.
Brewers, like brewing a beer. Rhythm Brewers. Okay.
RhythmBrewers.com. So play music, play with my dog, hang out with my wife on the front porch. That's pretty much some of it.
Sounds good.
Very cool. Sounds like a good life.
I like it.
All right. So last question from me of the day, and the last of the famous four. What do you believe sets apart successful real estate investors from all those who give up, fail, or never get started?
For me, it's kind of a two-part thing. I think the first part is hard work. None of this stuff is easy per se. I think you put your time in on the front end to reap the rewards later. It's not easy going out and driving neighborhoods and looking for deals and going to closings and then going and maybe doing some of the rehabs yourself none of that stuff is easy. I mean, it's much easier to just, work your job, punch the clock, come home, take your shoes off, and that's it, go to bed, so I think that's half of it. The other half of it is persistence. I mean, it would have been real easy for us to give up after we had lost that bundle of money and say, well, we're never messing with real estate again. We're just going to work our jobs and collect our money, and we'll put some money in an IRA, and then we'll get a pension, and we'll live the rest of our life out, and that's the sum of it, but we didn't let that stop us. It wasn't something, I never felt like, I'm maybe one of my more aggravating qualities, but I am persistent to the end of the earth, to the point. I mean, I have gotten into music groups by being persistent, saying, hey, if your guitarist ever quits, you need to call me up, and eventually one day the group said, hey, you know what? We need a guitar player. You want to come play with us?
Nice.
So I think hard work and persistence, I don't think there's any substitute for either one.
I love it. All right. Before we let you go, Joe, where can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you? You already gave the shameless plug, so, no more of that. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No.
Well, they can find me on the forums under JD Martin. I'm there on the forums pretty often. And I've got this little mentoring side thing I do under bizbrainstormers.com. And it doesn't make any money, but it's fun. I get to talk to people, and I charge a little bit of money, but it's really just to make sure people don't waste my time. Because I don't have a lot of time to waste. So I do that a little bit, and so they can check that out, but they can find me on the forums. I'm always there to impart whatever advice or smart aleck remarks I can for free.
Right on.
Very cool.
All right, Joe. Well, take care. Thanks so much for coming on. We really do appreciate it, and lots of luck to you going forward.
Hey, guys, I really appreciate it. And what you're doing with the forums and the site is phenomenal. I just want to give you that plug. It is the best real estate and business forum on the web, hands down.
Wow. Thank you.
Agreed.
That means a lot. Thank you. All right. Take care.
Thanks.
All right, guys. That was Joe J.D. Martin, episode 243 here at the Bigger Pockets podcast. Yeah.
You know what I like about that show a lot?
What's that?
It shows that even, there's even hope for guys like you, Josh. Average people, maybe a little bit below average guys like you can still make a good living, investing in real estate. That's what I love about him. The average Joe.
Right. And is that I'm trying to understand what are you trying to imply here?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying, you could be like Josh Dorkin here and, just be an average guy, and you can still succeed at real estate.
Wow.
So,
that's great. Yeah. That's great. Listen, I appreciate it. I take anything that you say as a compliment, even when you are trying to belittle me, tear me down.
Yep.
But
all day.
Yeah. Well, it was great. Good show. I like what Joe's doing. I think it makes a lot of sense. Yep. And I think it would make a lot of sense for a lot of people. So, hey, there's another one in the books, man.
Another one in the books. Yeah. And I like also, he doesn't have 100 units, oftentimes we look at people come on the show and I'm guilty of it too. They got 100 properties. They got 1,000 properties. I got to go do that.
Yeah.
But Joe's like, well, what do I really want? I want to play music in a band. I want to go and, spend time with my wife on the front porch. I love that he said that. For me, he bought 12 properties, has financial freedom, pays all his bills if he needed to. But in the meantime, he just works a job he likes. He hangs out and does what he likes to do with life and takes care of his properties until he no longer wants to work that job.
Sounds great.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty good life to me. So
there is no one path, right? There's no one path that works for everyone. And, here's, I think, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which is you're not in a race against everyone else around you. Right.
Okay.
who cares if that other guy is, is working on his 100th unit or his 1000th unit? It's meaningless. What do you need? What do you want? Like, if you need one property, hey, like Brandon, you went and bought your daughter a house when she was born, right?
Fourplex.
Yeah. I wish I had done that for my 3 children, right? I'm like, oh man, maybe I should have done that. That would have been a great idea, but it's brilliant. It's like, even if you had just done that,
yeah,
right?
It accomplishes that goal.
That accomplishes a goal for her. Maybe that's her college fund. Maybe that's her post-college. Maybe that's her retirement. That's her nest egg, whatever it is. Right. So figure out what you need and go for it. I mean, you don't have to like shoot to be some big mogul. You just got to figure out what you want, what you need. Maybe you want to be a mogul, but maybe you just want to be an average Joe. So
yeah, maybe
do what you got to do. All right. Good stuff. Brandon.
You want to go get some lunch?
Let's go eat.
All right.
You guys, I'm Josh Dorkin. Signing off.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
It's time for the Random 5.
All right, and coming back in real quick, we are going to end this show with the Random 6. So, question for you, Joe, JD. Would you rather be invisible or be able to read minds? And why?
I would much rather be invisible because I do not want to know what most people are thinking. Most people know what I'm thinking.
There you go. There you go. All right, would you rather work for the FBI or NASA?
I would rather probably work for NASA, but only because that goes against kind of my government paranoia streak.
There you go.
What is your dream car?
My dream car is a 1969 Mustang Fastback.
Nice.
Nice.
When are you going to get it?
Yeah.
Well, I used to have some of those old cars, and I used to work on them, and it was a lot of fun. So maybe I might get once again another day.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
Have you ever had a teacher that's changed your life? And if so, how so?
I have. I had a high school teacher. When I was in high school, I got in a little bit of trouble with the law, and he actually wrote a letter to the court for me, and the court still wasn't lenient on me. They still didn't care. The letter made no difference whatsoever to the court, but it made a huge difference to me.
Yeah.
That I was probably somebody that was heading maybe down the wrong road, and to know that there was this guy out there that really had no reason to do anything for me other than he saw something there.
Yeah. That's great.
Cool.
That's great. Brandon?
What is your favorite card game?
My favorite card game is probably a tie between euchre and cribbage.
Yeah,
Wow.
I don't know euchre.
Isn't
but
that what you
cribbage.
play when you're like 80?
Maybe, but I'm really good at both of them.
Yeah.
I'm really good at both
Wow.
of them. I can,
So Joe goes down to the old age home and takes advantage of.
it's part of my retirement plan.
Awesome. All right, last question. Are you a good cook? And if so, or if not, what's the best thing that you make?
I am such a bad cook that I have actually melted pots. That is a true story.
Wow.
I have turned pots into molten shapes of metal, so I am generally not allowed to use the stove. Luckily for me, my wife is a fantastic cook, so it doesn't matter.
I love it. All right, Joe. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. It was a lot of fun being with you guys.